Okay, this is my long-term review of the MG4 Trophy Extended Range, the 77 kilowatt hour version. And so it's been around 10 months now and 20,000 kilometers. So I want to talk about my experiences with the car. And of course, it's as a daily driven car as well. And the first Chinese car which I've ever had anything to do with. And so I think to save everyone some time, I'm just going to start off with the bad stuff, and everyone can decide for themselves whether it's a deal breaker or not. And so from the driving perspective, I really have only one negative thing to say, which is, of course, as many people have noted, the lane keep assist. It's not really that great. It's not dangerous. I've seen some articles in the British press saying that the lane keep assist is dangerous, but at least here on this car, which was delivered in November 2023, so it's got sort of late 2023 software on it, it's not dangerous. I have driven an earlier version of the car back in November 2022, and I think that was borderline dangerous. It shoved you back quite strongly, and of course, the sort of issues when the camera doesn't read the lines properly, and it gives you and back then that version would give you sort of a very powerful shove back. That could be dangerous for people who didn't know that the system was active, or first time driving the car and they didn't know how sort of aggressive it was. Now with this version of the car, it's just deeply annoying, and the settings are kind of buried in the touchscreen here. So if you forget to turn it off before driving, you're going to be fiddling around while you're driving to turn that off, and it takes around 5 clicks through the system to actually turn that off. So I'm really not a fan of the lane keep assist in this car, and it's actually part of the reason I wanted to make this video now, just before 1 year. So I'm going to be booking the car in for its first service next month, and so I've heard that there's an update that's supposed to make the lane keep assist a bit more civilized, and just kind of to compare how it is now and then after the update. I did request the update earlier this year, but my dealer hadn't heard anything about the update. But that's another thing, here in Germany, the dealer network, it's it's a bit amateurish, if I'm being honest, and I mean, no fault to of the dealer itself. Like the service for my dealer is really good, but it's kind of the after sales aftercare support from SAIC-MG is just lacking. And I've seen in various sort of forums as well that dealers are complaining that they kind of just get these cars shipped to them, and the sort of after sales support for them is just lacking. They have to inform themselves about software updates. They have to request the updates themselves. So it's not just some automatic procedure. And while I do appreciate the caution with software updates, I know with this kind of really high-tech cars and all the assistance systems, software updates can cause more issues than they solve. And of course, MG, they're being a bit overly cautious with that. But yeah. So that's as far as driving, my main issue with the car, and as far as the other big issue, it's the app, and I'll put a screenshot here of the app. And so the main issue with the app is it has some sort of connection issues. So you firstly have the kind of server issues from MG. Sometimes it can't connect to the car. Even if you've driven the car recently, so it's not an issue of the car sort of going to sleep or anything like that. And then, of course, the digital key function is really not that great. So I've noticed, even when you're within Bluetooth distance of the car, you can't unlock it, even though that should work via Bluetooth. And usually it does, and it unlocks rather quickly. But sometimes it doesn't, and that's really annoying. And then with the digital key function as well, sometimes it takes a few tries to get it to actually start the car. And this car is kind of like on a Tesla, so you just get in and you press the brake and it starts. But with the digital key function, you have to keep authorizing it on your phone. So, for example, if you get out of the car, to unload some stuff, and then you get back in, it's going to ask you to reauthorize again, and potentially that's quite dangerous. If you've just left the car on the side of the road or something, and you have to fiddle around on your phone to actually authorize the car to start via the app. So that's something which is quite annoying. And so that's sort of as far as the software experience goes, my issues. And so the next issues are going to be outside the car. So I'm going to step out and show you a couple of issues I've had with the car. Okay. So here outside the car, I have had unfortunately one issue with it as far as cosmetic damage goes, and that is I had quite some nasty stone chips on this car. So I was on holiday in Italy, quite a long stretch on the motorway, and after that, well, I wasn't tailgating anyone or anything. I had the adaptive cruise control on, so I don't think that was the issue. But I did start noticing some rather severe stone chips here in the bonnet of the car, and so they have been, here you go. So here are a couple of new ones, as you can probably see right here. So you've got some pretty nasty stone chips right there. The other ones were filled in earlier. So that's something I've been noticing with this car, and it does seem to be a little bit of a problem with the newer style of solvent-free paints. I had a similar issue with my Peugeot E208, which was a black car, so very you would see the stone chips immediately. But unfortunately, it does seem that this car has more issues with stone chips and sort of paint quality, as some other reviewers have noted. So I've noticed that the paint itself, as you can see here on the chips, the paint itself is relatively thick, and you can see that it's kind of pitted in very deeply, which also makes kind of doing kind of standard touch up on it kind of difficult, because you do see those sort of crater marks after you've repaired it. But I have noticed that this car is rather prone to stone chips, and it's almost as if the paint, although it's rather thick, it does seem sort of like a very thin crust which is prone to chipping off. And so that's definitely something, after 100,000 miles with this car, you can imagine how sort of nasty the paint's going to look, and it's just, I mean, that is really unacceptable paint quality in my eyes. And my second main point of criticism here with the car, at least from the sort of exterior perspective, is the boot. So as you can see, the boot itself is rather big, but it's also very shallow if you look here at the parcel shelf. So when I was on holiday, I went to Italy with the car, and unfortunately sort of bigger suitcases are going to stick up above this parcel shelf, and then you have to decide, okay, am I going to remove the parcel shelf for the extra space? No. And then you kind of expose your valuables to thieves and prying eyes. So that's definitely an issue which you sort of have to deal with. So if you are going to remove the parcel shelf, you might need to actually consider covering your valuables. Okay, coming back to the interior now, I want to talk a little bit about the ergonomics and infotainment system. So to start off with here, the steering wheel, you have this kind of unmarked joysticks. You might, when you first get in the car, you're really confused about what these do, because they're no clear mark. I mean, here you've got your sort of quick shortcut buttons, but So, you know, to start off with, here you have the voice assistant, which is quite useless, but if you hold it down, you can get to Siri or Google Assistant. Here you've got, this is for the adaptive cruise control and other assistant systems, and then here you can, you know, obviously set your distance and set your speed. This is a shortcut button which you can set to, for example, the 360 camera, and here you have another one which you can set to, for example, toggle the regen settings, or even, you know, toggle the climate control, that sort of thing. Then here you can switch through your information display panels here, and of course you've got the phone button here, which just opens up the dial or Apple CarPlay, the phone menu in Apple CarPlay. And this is how you get through the information panel here, or you can change your music and volume as well. But you have to first deselect the info panel. So if you click here, this is something which most people don't know. If you select the info panel here, clicking left and right will actually switch through your menus. But if you deselect it here, it will act as the volume and next track button for the sound system. I want to show you just how annoying it is to turn off the lane keep assist, as I mentioned before. If you're an Apple CarPlay, you have to click on the home button, then go to the vehicle menu, MG Pilot, then you have to go down to lane keep assist, and here you can turn it off, disable, or you can set it to alert. Now, it's really annoying when you're driving, because if you click here on the text, it doesn't actually toggle the button, so you have to click exactly on the button to actually get that little prompt to come up. So that is really difficult while you're driving, and honestly, you know, I recommend, if it really annoys you, stick a little post-it note here, and just make sure you do it every time before you set off, because doing that while you're driving, especially on a twisty road where those kind of alerts get annoying, it can be dangerous. So, you know, just keep that in mind. As far as CarPlay, it doesn't have wireless CarPlay, which I find kind of a shame. You know, in this day and age, a lot of cheaper cars have wireless CarPlay, so you know, you're going to have to install some sort of adapter, as I have here. I've just got it set right there under the center console, so that's quite nice for hiding any sort of wires or adapters and so on. As far as the adapters, well, a lot of them aren't compatible with this car, so you know, I don't want to you know, do any free advertising for them, but I have a car link to Air in here, but that didn't work out of the box, so I had to fiddle around with settings and install an update to get it to work with this car. And I have tried another CarPlay adapter that didn't work, wireless CarPlay adapter, which didn't work at all. So for some reason this car has some compatibility issues with CarPlay. To move on to sort of the interior quality, as you can see, everything's holding up really well. Steering wheel looks brand new. Here on the door panels as well, looks brand new, and I've nicked it a few times with my watch band, which is a little bit sharp, so, but hasn't left any sort of marks there. The only thing which really does annoy me a little bit, although it hasn't started tearing, is this sort of lumbar support here, and as you can see, it does look a little bit worn. So I do expect that might start to really deteriorate and perhaps even start cracking with time. So it's really a shame that they decided to use this kind of pleather, so, you know, fake leather, vinyl accents on the seats. You know, this is a really nice sort of fabric material, and I wish they'd just extended it here to the sides as well, because, you know, the warranty on the seats, it's not that long. I'll put a little tag here in the video how long the seat warranty is, and I think it's about a year, but I'll have to check. So that's not good. I don't like that. I would have just preferred cloth seats. I don't know why manufacturers are sort of putting in this vinyl fake leather as if it's supposed to be high quality. I mean, a decent cloth seat, like on many French cars, you know, that just looks better, it feels better. This is just sort of cheap and horrible, to be honest. Other than that, you know, interior quality, this is frankly better than a lot of VW products at the moment. So, you know, the Chinese can really put together a car, and, you know, frankly, that's why they're a threat to our car industry. You look, you know, nothing creaking over here. You know, it's really, I mean, here you've got the indicator stalks, I mean, wiper stalks, indicator stalks, really nice action right there. I've linked Matt Watson from CarWow's TikTok video about the interior quality of this car down below, and you can see what a seasoned car reviewer thinks about the interior quality of the MG4. I mean, the only critique is, of course, you know, the glossy plastics, which seems to be plaguing the car industry. You know, the VW products are full of it as well, and that's a shame, because if you don't look after these plastics, you know, you wipe them down a bit too, you know, with an inappropriate cloth or something, you know, they're going to show marks. And in my Peugeot E208, which has sort of a lot of glossy plastic as well, you are starting to see the scratches. So you know, it is really, I mean, it looks all right. I know most people, you know, don't like it. I think it looks all right, but it collects fingerprints, it collects scratches. So you know, I wish they'd just done away with it and done it all in this kind of plastic, or sort of matte black plastic instead. Now to come to the sound system, and you know, I'm really a sort of big fan of cars with decent sound systems. So and in the last video, it was kind of underwhelming. You know, it's a 6-speaker system, no subwoofer. Frankly, it didn't show the greatest promise, and it was a little bit underwhelming. But I have since played around in the settings, and a lot of, frankly, a lot of the sound quality is to do with sort of fiddling around in the settings, sort of optimization. So just to show you what kind of profile I'm using now, if we go to I believe yeah, here you go. So it's under volume setting for some reason. So I have loudness turned on, which accentuates some of the frequency ranges, which as far as I understand, I'm not an audio specialist, but as far as I know, it kind of tries to separate out some of the frequencies in your music. STV, that's speed adaptive volume, I have that turned off because I find it kind of annoying, you know, and of course, you know, it starts to play excessively loudly at speed. So I have the EQ turned off because frankly, you know, you have to change it for all sorts of different genres of music you listen to, and that's it. I do listen to a very wide range of music, so I have sound field balancing set up in the middle of the car, well, you know, the driver, so it's fine for me. I have Alchemist 3D sound turned on for all passengers. I have the virtual subwoofer on, which I think is the most important setting to actually getting decent sound quality out of this. And so I've got the same royalty free tracks loaded as tested last time. So, and I do think I'll put in a little clip of the music from last time and the sound quality. So, and I think there's a significant difference. There's a lot more bass. It sounds a lot richer, a lot clearer without what a lot of cars, like I tried out the Volvo EX30 with its premium sound system, and it was just way too bass heavy, even when I turned the treble all the way up and turned the bass all the way down. I think this is a really nice, balanced, rich sound quality keeping in mind for a car of this price range. I mean, this is sort of, let's say, if you're looking at a nice car, this is sort of a nice, well-spec VW Golf or Peugeot 308 sort of experience, and it's an EV, of course, with with the extra cost that comes with being an EV. So in the UK it's about 36 grand for this car. In Germany it's a bit more expensive, but that's just down to the absolutely ludicrous subsidy schemes which Germany had, and MG still hasn't reduced their prices. So it's about 36 grand in the UK, 36 grand in France, and a little bit more in the Netherlands, I think about 38 grand euros. So this is a relatively cheap car for an EV with this kind of range. So but I think the sound system is pretty good, so we'll just give it a try. So, frankly, I think the bass is good. I think it does a pretty good job of separating the different tracks and instruments in a song. So I'm pretty impressed. It is only a 6-speaker system. It hasn't got a subwoofer, so it's all sort of trickery from software trickery. In the front here, where you have the majority of your speakers, so you do have the two up front and then the two here in the door panels. So up front it's pretty good. In the back, less so, to be honest. And that is sort of the downside of using a 6-speaker system with a bit of software trickery. You can't really achieve the same sound quality all around the car versus if you had 8 speakers or 10 speakers or 12 speakers all around the car. Okay, just one more point about the infotainment system, which isn't really an issue for me because I use CarPlay for navigation most of the time. But the navigation system here, it's really not all that great. So it does have live traffic, which is a feature exclusive to these higher end models, so the Trophy or luxury spec here in Europe. So it is quite basic. It can find points of interest, so it can find charging stations, but it can't actually plan a route using those charging stations. So it's completely manual route planning. For new EV drivers, it's not all that great because it can't, like for example with the Volvo Google based system, or with Tesla, of course, they can see the charging stations. They know how many are occupied. They know what the charging speed of each charger is. So this doesn't have that. You're kind of on your own, and I just wouldn't recommend trusting it because you do risk getting into trouble. So just use your phone, use a better route planner, use a pump, use charging time or whatever, use some app, or do it yourself, but just don't trust this because it just doesn't really know what it's doing, to be honest. It's just a normal sort of typical sat nav. Could probably navigate you relatively well. I don't think it knows about diversions and closed roads and things like that. It's just sort of a dumb basic sat nav, although it does have traffic, live traffic, which is good. So that's there, but that is a exclusive to the higher end model. So okay, so before we start the driving section of this review, just to come to sort of range and charging speed, realistically I'm getting around 450 kilometers now with mixed usage, and I'm not driving long distances, so the AC is working to cool down the car, or the heater's working to heat up the car in the morning. So, it's not ideal conditions. And, I'm getting around 450 kilometers now in this weather, which is sort of autumn, summer, and in the winter, I'm getting around 400 kilometers, which I think is all right. It claims 520 kilometers WLTP, and, bearing in mind WLTP, it's not really very accurate for EVs. It's a test standard which was created for ICE cars, and frankly, it's quite good at that. I've driven petrol cars, and they get close to the WLTP, but just keep in mind for EVs, it's not all that realistic. So I find that to be a good value. And I took the car down to Italy in just after Easter, and I did some long distance driving here. We drive at constant speeds and using adaptive cruise control, and I got it to around 500 kilometers, which I think for sort of motorway driving, albeit with some traffic, and then of course with the adaptive cruise control, so I'm not always driving at constantly high speed. I think that's all right. And of course, keep in mind that there are, and shame on MG for doing this, there are some market-specific differences and some equipment which this EU spec car gets, which the British cars don't, which, I find kind of unacceptable, because if you look at just sort of the French price or the Dutch price of this car, it's pretty similar to the UK. So, for example, this car gets an 11 kilowatt three-phase AC charger. So, that's I think, of course, three-phase charging isn't all that common in the UK, so that's acceptable. But this car does get a heat pump, and the British versions don't, and I think that's kind of unacceptable, because the British weather, while mild, is kind of the best conditions for a heat pump. So, it's a bit of a shame that it doesn't come with a heat pump in the UK. And I have noticed that the heating consumption of this car is really low, even in winter. So, it's a really good heat pump, unlike sort of the Stellantis cars, or early Stellantis cars like our E208, which just isn't all that great. It still relies a lot on the electrical resistive heater in winter, and that does hike the consumption. So this car has a good heat pump. Then coming to charging speed, so as I mentioned, 11 kilowatt AC. In Germany we can pull 11 kilowatts at home, so that works quite well. As far as DC charging, it's a little bit disappointing. So it does have a claimed top max charge speed of 144 kilowatt, but that's really hard to achieve in anything but ideal conditions, even with the battery heating turned on. So that has been disappointing. And although the claimed time of 10 to 80% is 38 minutes, that does hold true. I mean, no matter what, the algorithm, it figures it out. It averages to around 38 minutes most of the time. When I came back from Italy, I did a really long stretch from northern Italy up to the south of Germany, and on that route, actually, I did 2 charging stops after each other. So one in the sort of late morning and one in the afternoon. And I noticed that on the afternoon session, the battery was already heated up, and I guess the system was maintaining the heat in the battery to keep it at optimal temperature. And I noticed that the charging speed on the afternoon session was really good. It achieved around, I think, 142 kilowatts. So just, pretty much exactly the claimed maximum. And I started at exactly 10%, and up to 80% is 33 minutes. So, I think under ideal conditions, you can beat the claimed 38 minutes. And I think MG knows that, and the 38 minutes is sort of, a safe bet where they don't want to falsely claim anything. So, but it can do a little bit better, which, I'm pleased about, because 38 minutes, for a car with this kind of battery, so it's an MC battery. I know some people think it's LFP, but it is actually an MC battery, and of this size, it should be able to sustain a higher charging speed. So overall, I would say the charging performance of this car is average, but it's not all that great. the ID3 77 kilowatt, it does have a slightly higher claimed charging speed, but it doesn't have the battery heating. So in winter, unless you're doing long distances where the battery has time to heat up on its own, you're likely not going to get the claimed 180 kilowatts from the ID models either. So just to show you here under, as far as the battery heating is concerned, you go here to energy consumption from the battery menu, and you can turn on intelligent battery heating, which will decide on its own if the battery needs heating or not. I would generally recommend to leave this turned off unless you do plan on DC rapid charging this car, because it will consume quite a lot of power when running. So you do want to avoid using that when you don't need it. But I think that shows that they have put some thought into this car, that this had that option before the ID models, which we're only getting it now with the facelift. So now to talk about what I really like about this car, and that's the handling. It's frankly a really great handling car, and I've driven a lot of EVs over the years, from sort of noddy cars, clown cars like the Dacia Spring, up to Tesla Model 3, the last gen Tesla Model 3 long range, and the Volvo EX30. And frankly, this is one of my favorite cars to drive as far as handling is. Really well balanced. You have the sort of rear wheel drive handling characteristics of this car, as opposed to the XPower, which feels a little bit heavier to drive, a little more unwieldy. This car has that nice sort of light rear wheel drive steering characteristics, which I quite like. It's got 240 horsepower, so 0 to 100 kilometers an hour in 6.5 seconds, which it's certainly not earth-shattering as far as EVs are concerned, but I think it's a fair number, and it does get going in real life situations. And although the XPower is far better as far as just raw performance figures, it does feel a little bit heavier to drive on one hand, and on the other hand, you have got the issue of consumption, because that car does consume a lot more than this, because it does have the same sort of rear motor setup as this, but then it has an additional motor. And especially when you start taxing it, that's really the thing. When you start using that front motor, when you start really pushing it, you do find that the consumption goes through the roof. And with this car, consumption is relatively good. It's I think even a tad better than the Trophy long range. So the 64 kilowatt hour version of this car. So I think this is the best option to go for. This mix between performance, handling, and range. So I'm quite a big fan of the handling of this car, and the second best sort of the one car which I liked about as much as this was the Volvo EX30 extended range, the single motor rear wheel drive version. The only downside is that doesn't really get close to its claimed range. I was seeing about 350 to 400 kilometers of 475 claimed, and I was driving it when I tested the EX30. I was driving it on a sort of combined cycle, not really that fast, bit of motorway, a lot of sort of rural roads like this, and just disappointing range. And it's on these kind of B roads here where you can really feel how good the balance and handling of this car is. You've got they say 50-50 weight distribution, great weight distribution, great positive feedback from the steering. It's not sort of artificially heavy on like the last gen Tesla I drove, that that did seem as if a lot of the heaviness was just coming from the how the electric power steering was set up. It's not a heavy car, it's a rear-wheel drive car, so there's no reason why it should be heavy. And this has nice, light, agile steering, but very progressive. It's not sort of like on a Dacia Spring or something, a really light car where it feels floaty, or it feels like there's no feeling. It has good feeling. It's nice, positive comes back to the center well, and it's nice and light. It's easy to drive. The brakes are stiff but progressive, so you feel that they are hard to press, but nice and progressive. So it's not like you're slamming on the brakes all the time. So yeah, I'm really happy with the handling of this car, and I think as a sort of, I'm not really someone who drives an EV for its environmental accolades. I do believe it's better for the environment, but I'm like an ex-petrol head, ex-diesel head. It's all about the handling and performance and that sort of thing, and this car has got it. And I think that just shows how much the Chinese car industry has developed over the years. I remember watching the Top Gear China episode about 11 years ago, and the Chinese could barely build a decent car even on the Western platform. And here you have, of course with some Western technology, but you have a Chinese car platform which can really go toe to toe with the best of the sort of what the Western manufacturers have to deliver in this EV category. You have really good range, you have really good handling, decent performance, and you have the sort of foresight to include some decent EV features which the ID cars and the Stellantis cars, they forgot, like the preheating. The older pre-facelift ID cars and Stellantis cars, they don't give you that option. It's all automatic, but on one hand it's automatic and it's always consuming power even when you don't need it, but on the other hand it doesn't really have the ability to preheat the battery to a temperature where it's useful for charging. So that really shows that some engineering thought has gone into this car, albeit it does have its issues in implementation. I mean, as we've seen, the infotainment software, it's not the best, admittedly. It's functional, it's good enough for CarPlay and Android Auto, which is practically all I use it for, but it's not in terms of standalone functionality as navigation or route planning. It hasn't really got that, admittedly, but the car itself is really well thought out, and I think that's what should really be scaring the Western car makers, because coming from a Peugeot E208, and it's a basic car, and it also lacks a ton of functionality, but just the reliability issues with that car, and the suspension's going out now, after 4 years. So that's an issue. It's had so many breakdowns. It had to have parts replaced in 5 instances. So AC compressor, we had the 11 kilowatt onboard charger twice, high voltage DC cabling had to be replaced, and the brake pedal micro switch, as well as the CCS controller had to be reprogrammed once as a non-hardware fault. So tons of problems with that car. And then you have these Chinese manufacturers like MG. Of course they've had a bad reputation in the past, but this car, 20,000 kilometers, trouble-free, as far as reliability issues. I mean, you might have just heard the lane keep assist there beeping. I wasn't over the line. I might have been a bit further from the center of the road, but I wasn't over the line, and that's definitely one thing which bothers me with this car, which I hope will be fixed in the upcoming software update. But to come back to reliability, it's been rock solid, 20,000 kilometers. Of course, not entirely representative as a figure. The Peugeot started showing its first issues around 32,000 kilometers, and just downhill from there. It's now at 93,000, and you've got, you know, a lot of clunking from the suspension. You know, probably going to need some suspension components replaced in the next year. But this car, you know, as far as it's got software bugs, but as far as reliability, it's been rock solid. 20,000 kilometers, you know, that's when we started having the first issue with the Peugeot E208, which ended up being the brake pedal micro switch. So, you know, the Chinese can build a decent car. The interior quality in here, as Matt Watson will attribute to in his review of the car, it's better than a Volkswagen ID3. It's better than the current Golf 8. It's really good. It's solid. It doesn't creak. It's simple, but it's well put together. And what more can you want? And you know, this car has been compared a lot to the ID3, to the e-Golf even. You know, the German press likes to call it the Chinese electric Golf, but this is the spiritual successor to the Leaf. This is what the Leaf Mark II should have been. You know, the Leaf Mark II was already outdated in 2016. I mean, CHAdeMO was dying out at that time. You know, Europeans had decided to go for CCS. You know, charging speed 50 kilowatt on the Leaf, just no good. This is what the Leaf should have been. You know, a big, practical electric hatchback, decent charging speed, decent handling, decent range, decent performance. You know, this is the spiritual successor to the Leaf. And it's just a shame that the Japanese have squandered away all the early lead that they had in EVs. You know, that's really the shame of it. I mean, I know the Germans are still struggling a little bit, and of course, you know, the Chinese, you know, 50% EV sales, you know, they know how to make an EV. As far as the car itself, you know, as far as sort of software features which are desired in the West, you know, they're still lacking, because those are just features which aren't there in China. You know, in China they want WeChat integration, they want Baidu and all of that, and you know, that's just of no use here. So you know, for them to kind of convert their cars to Western wants and needs, it's that's difficult for them. But otherwise, as the car, I'm really happy with this car. Coming from, you know, I never even considered a Chinese brand to start with. You know, I started out with the Peugeot, but it's just been so problematic. And you know, at the time, the Korean manufacturers were charging quite the premium. For example, we're looking at a Kona 64 kilowatt was about the same price as this, albeit, you know, with really slow charging speed, and you know, just being a bit of a last gen car. The European manufacturers, you know, the ID3, I know some reports of high degradation with those cars. I don't know how much of that's to do with sort of software issues or that sort of thing, or you know, whether there really is a problem with them or not. I don't really know, but you know, that put me off the IDs. And for me, coming from the Peugeot and really having that uncertainty of whether Peugeot would end up paying for, you know, a lot of the sort of problems with that car. You know, you have to sort of fight them tooth and nail on a lot of things, as far as warranty and as far as the sort of warranty and you know, goodwill issues were concerned. For me, you know, it just wasn't attractive to go for another European manufacturer, you know, because most of them have really poor warranties. And at that time, Peugeot hadn't really done anything to remedy those issues, and really given any extended warranties. I know now on the new cars, you know, they're offering 8-year warranty, but you know, for us sort of early adopters, we feel really hung out to dry, to be honest. You know, it's just, it's almost unfair that we had to go through all of that. You know, we had to have those long waiting times for spare parts, you know, and sort of wait to see what would be covered in the end by Peugeot. And now, you know, people who buy the new cars, they get 8-year warranty just because the cars aren't selling at the moment. But you know, for me, of course, you know, big warranty was a selling point for this car, as well as, you know, of course, the Korean Korean manufacturers would have been interesting as well, but price-wise at that time, before the announcement of the Kia EV3, it was just kind of too expensive. And that's how I ended up with the Chinese car. And so far, it's been rather good, and I do really understand the sort of threat which they pose to our Western manufacturers, exactly for that reason of being largely, let's say, the technologically quite well off. A lot of from the EV tech standpoint, I'm not talking about assisted systems or anything like that, and then better warranty and potentially cheaper as well. Okay, to conclude the video and to share my thoughts about the MG4 and whether I'd recommend one, well, to start with, the car has been mechanically impeccable. We haven't had any mechanical issues, which is a really nice change from my experience with the E208, which I did a video about, the E208, about 90,000 kilometers and sort of problems I've had with the car, and sort of luckily everything on that car was covered under warranty or under goodwill, but I did break down what the costs would have been if the car had been completely out of warranty, or Peugeot had decided not to cover anything on the car, and frankly it would have been in the range of about 10,000 euros, so absolutely disastrous. Well, frankly, the MG4 has been a lot better, but there still are some issues, and the first one, which I consider really unacceptable, frankly, is the paint quality. Even with these regulations, even with the solvent-free paint, it's unacceptable. And even the Peugeot was better. It looks better now at about 90,000 kilometers than this car does at 20,000. So, frankly, that's just not acceptable for MG to be bringing out a car with paint quality like that. And I really don't know what the issue is. Everything else on the car seems really well built, as Matt Watson will attest to in his video as well. Yeah, I really don't know what's going on there. And then secondly is the lane keep assist. So it's not dangerous. I know some reports have said it's dangerous, but at least on this car it's not dangerous, because the actual force of the lane keep assist is it's pretty mild. If you just hold the steering wheel, you can easily overpower it, but it's still deeply annoying, and it's so irritating to turn it off, at least on this car. I know with the latest update you can set a quick shortcut just by swiping down on the touch screen, and you can set a quick shortcut, but you still need to confirm it. So yeah, it's quite annoying, to be honest. And then well, as for the other assistance systems, generally they're all right. Definitely not the best in the industry. For example, the speed sign recognition, it's pretty bad. It's often wrong. Thankfully, this car was made before the intelligent speed assist regulation, otherwise it would be beeping at me all the time, and it doesn't know it can't read the speed signs correctly, so absolutely terrible in that way. So from my perspective personally, it's okay, because it doesn't have that assistance system, but the speed recognition, at least in this software, is not that great. Then to come to the traffic jam assist, which is sort of a mix between a steer assist and adaptive cruise control. It's not too bad. It's definitely not the best in the industry. I drove the Volvo EX30 back in May, and that was just far better. So although there have been reports of software issues with the EX30, of course, the test car that I had was spotless. It was brilliant, but you'd expect that. Volvo has obviously put some effort into make sure that test car was in tip-top shape. So I can't say for everyone, but in my experience it was far better. And just an example, on the motorway, this needs a correction every let's say about 3-4 minutes or so, and I drove a stretch of 50 kilometers, so 30 miles, about just under half an hour with the Volvo EX30 with its assistance systems turned on. and I only had to make one correction. Frankly, with this car, you've got to hold the steering wheel quite tight at all times. Of course, like all assistance systems, you have to keep your hands on the steering wheel, but with this car, you just have to stop it doing something stupid, to stop it veering onto the hard shoulder or something. You always have to be mindful. And with the Volvo system, of course, you have to keep your hands on the steering wheel, but you don't have to keep that sort of pressure on it to make sure that it's doing the right thing. The assistance systems on that car are good enough that they're really a true assistance system. So it offloads work from the driver. I feel like this car doesn't really do that because you can't put your full trust in it. At least on this software version. I don't know about the next one. I'm still waiting for the update, and reading in the forums, the R59 update, the next update, it's not automatically done by a lot of dealers. You really have to push them for it. So that's just not acceptable from MG either. And what can I say? Service is part of the user experience, unfortunately. And just to come to the adaptive cruise control as well, which has a little bug or feature. I mean, I know it's in the manual, but it's just not all that great. So it will slow down. So if you have the adaptive cruise control set to a certain speed, it will slow down in curves. But it seems completely arbitrary. It just seems to cut the speed by a certain percentage. Of course, you don't want to be barreling into a curve at high speed, but this cuts it beyond any sort of reasonable sense of safety. It really is a hindrance to the driver and a hindrance to the traffic behind you. So, and that's not good enough. I know that's been fixed in the next update, but like I said, there's no automatic rollout of the updates. I mentioned before that the dealer network seems to be amateurish here in Germany, but what I'm reading from the forums, what people are saying out of the UK, it doesn't seem that much better either. So that's definitely something to keep in mind with MG, that the dealer experience, especially with these newer sort of more complicated cars, it's not all that great. And then of course, to come back to another thing I mentioned, the charging speed. Well, it's okay, it's average. I know the MG4, the long range version, well, the charging speed on that is proportional to the battery size, a bit better, and it doesn't seem to struggle as much in winter, which is kind of difficult to understand why that might be, because ultimately these cars are on the same platform, they have the same sort of battery heater and so on. So it's not all that great. And by today's standards, like that Volvo EX30, which is about the same price as this, or at least here in Germany, that has a little bit better charging speed. Then of course the 77 kilowatt IDs, they have a better peak charging speed, and now with the latest facelift, they have battery preheating as well. So it's the charging speed, well, 144 kilowatts, not all that great for this sort of battery size, but then the average isn't all that great, especially in winter for some reason, even with the battery heating turned on. But just to really summarize my experience with this car, I am still really overall quite pleased with it. The handling is really good, and so far mechanical reliability has been good, which for me is such a relief, coming from the Peugeot E208, which frankly has been a complete disaster for us. And the experience with Peugeot hasn't been all that great either, because the waiting times for parts were abysmal. I think over 4 years of ownership, the car has been waiting for parts for about 12 months of that, which is just unacceptable, to be honest. And at least with this car, you have got the assurance of that 7-year warranty, which it is, although it is it is limited to certain components of the car, of course, like the really the mechanical components and the battery. I know the infotainment system has a different warranty, and the seats have a different warranty, and so on. I mean, and any sort of wearing components, of course, follow a different warranty. But that's kind of self-explanatory, unfortunately, and it's in line with other long warranties like you have from Hyundai or Kia. It's simply because it doesn't make sense for them to warranty wearing parts. That's just a sort of not realistic. But yeah, so overall, I still have a positive opinion of this car. And unfortunately, it is sort of the software or the assistance systems where Chinese cars start to kind of unravel a little bit. And that's simply because they are designed for a completely different market with completely different expectations and regulations. So, of course, things like lane keep assist are probably not that big of an issue in China because their safety testing is different. Euro NCAP puts a lot of emphasis on electronic assistance systems, and then you have sort of the infotainment system where you have CarPlay and Android Auto doesn't work all that well. Perhaps those aren't really features which are wanted in China or really demanded in China. I know that Android Auto isn't available at all in the Chinese market, so and they want things that we don't care about. So I do think that is a little bit the downfall of this car, and I know from for example the BYD Dolphin as well, it's not all that great on a software front either. So bear that in mind. But frankly, I still recommend the car. I couldn't recommend the E208, but this car I'm still happy to recommend to people. But I always mention the caveat of the lane keep assist, and of course the app connectivity issues. So if you're someone who needs a car with an app that works perfectly every time without having to swipe down to refresh it all the time, and you need that functionality to set a scheduled charge or preheat the cabin or set battery preheating or something, or even just using the digital key, if it's something that you need to work perfectly every time, then look somewhere else. Go to Tesla, or perhaps the new BMW seem to have that pretty well sorted now, or perhaps the Volvo EX30, although I've also heard that is somewhat unreliable in certain instances. But definitely, if you're looking for a car with an application that works perfectly every time, this is not the one for you. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. And another point which is somewhat annoying now, thankfully I'm not someone who uses the app functionality all that often. I'm not someone who uses a digital key. I prefer the security of having the physical key, simply because you can't trust that app 100%. For me, the app, it's just useful to monitor the sort of charging state of the car and to know when that's going to be done. But for me, otherwise, I don't need that. Try it out. Make sure you're okay with the car. Always do an extended test drive. I did one in November 2022 with the MG4, and I just said no. At that time, the lane keep assist was so awful. I couldn't bear it. So that's just my recommendation with this car. Any car, you don't test it, make sure you can live with it, make sure that its issues are things that aren't complete deal breakers for you. I've linked my video review of the Peugeot E208 at 90,000 kilometers in the description below, and I go through some of the issues I've had with the car, as well as the potential cost of replacing those components outside of warranty. Now, luckily, Peugeot did cover everything, even though it did take a little bit of pressure on my part and on my dealer's part to get Peugeot to pay everything, because some of the components were out of warranty at that time.